Good day. My name is Stephen Parkus, and I'm here with Logan Woldridge for another Marshall Forest conversation. Logan, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be
Good to
here
be here.
today and talking about and digging into the philosophy behind the Marshall Forest. Now, personally, my own personal philosophy. And I will admit, this is a fairly recent development. Within the last couple years, I started realizing the importance of, having my own set of guiding principles, if you will. So some of the things that have become very important to me are honesty and authenticity, being myself and truly myself, not putting on a mask or a fake face for people. Another one of those things is learning, knowledge, seeking wisdom, how to apply it and use it in my life. And I feel like, in addition to this, as well as kind of because of those things, I feel that self empowerment, the journey to empower myself, has become very important to me. Working with and integrating with Logan and the philosophy that he's developing here, uh, I had some concerns at first at how that would go, and I found that there's a constant focus on just learning. He's constantly educating and giving actionable tips, both in business and in coaching. And I've really found and I feel that not only is his approach intentional and unique, but also I feel that his overall goal is self empowerment and to empower the individuals that he's working with. And so, Logan, I'd ask that you just kind of define your philosophy in your own words here, too.
First, I'd like to say that when we're talking about our philosophy here, what we mean is the lens through which you approach things, right? So it's not the exact approach itself. It's more the guiding principles behind an approach. And my philosophy began as a child. I was always interested in philosophy, reading particularly Eastern philosophies. And, it's developed a lot since then, both within that code itself and many others that I've encountered and tried to incorporate and create into a more workable modern version. And when it comes to the training, and my approach in coaching and business and everything, a lot of it has evolved from that. The three biggest things I would say in the philosophy of the marsh forest and myself and life is a focus on performance throughout life, right? Meaning we're not trying to make any one attribute so much better than the others that it starts to be a detriment to another. This can be a slower path a lot of times, but in the end, I think it's much more sustainable. And it means that generally you're ready to tackle anything in life rather than everything a specific way, right? Like the old saying about the hammer and the nail. At the same time, when possible, I like to apply a nature centric approach, not just in regards to nature outside, but also your own nature. So with that, I just want to say I am not a big user of machines, and so when it comes to equipment and training, in the physical aspect, so a lot of my approach at most involves free weights. I developed with my philosophy, my training alongside both a heavy work schedule because I've worked a job alongside my training up until just the last year or two, and or going into the mountains for a summer to get away and focus on myself and just study. Honestly, I always brought books with me too. So and so then I had to learn to train with things like gymnastics rings, things like body weight and such. And I started with just calisthenics for the first 6 months. So all that being said, that's kind of the foundation of the philosophy here, to be able to approach this anywhere, regardless.
And can I ask, how much of this do you feel like developed or was influenced by that long, prolonged period that you had out in the mountains?
I would say it wasn't necessarily the direction influenced. Like I feel I was already headed in this direction. I already wanted to head in this certain direction of being able to train anywhere. The mountains had a twofold impact just in my philosophy and what I do, though, in that it allowed me to the time to be all the more certain that I wanted to head down this path, because it allowed me time to analyze and really settle into the surety that this was the right path for me and approach. And then it also helped me to realize that I wanted to be constructive with what I was doing rather than destructive. When I first started getting into training and nutrition, it was more for troubled, I guess you'll say, childhood. And then, the teenage years being on the streets like we both got into, there was a lot of violence and destruction involved. And so at first I thought that was all I could do with this. And so the mountains allowed me the time to figure out how to do something constructive with what I thought was only destructive.
Absolutely. I'm interested to hear a little bit more on, and I think this would fall under the first point you brought up of focusing on performance throughout life and kind of that balance. And kind of what I heard you say was just that in focusing on one thing or, one specific goal or area of wellness and health, it seems like we tend to take a loss in the opposite area or another area, as opposed to kind of this slow and steady focus on all areas. And so like the study of, I'm guessing, the mind and just kind of the overall spirituality and focus, emotions, physical, it sounds like it just is a slow, steady to approach to an awareness of everything.
It probably does stem from that. I can't say for certain. A lot of that could be subjective, you know. There's definitely a higher level of awareness, I think, necessary for this approach. And I'd just like to be clear here and say that while we are talking about not going too far in any one capability, that's applied to multiple levels. For instance, yes, I mean that in the physical training, such as, I don't want to explode my strength so much that now my flexibility suffers. I don't want to explode my size so much that my speed suffers. And at the same time, you can take that to a higher level, I guess, of application, in that I also don't want my physical to get too far ahead of my mental, or my emotional or spiritual, or just my ability to manage day-to-day tasks, the regular mundane day-to-days that we all have to, cooking your food and eating your food and brushing your teeth and all these things. That are honestly, those ones are the hardest for me to focus on, actually. But it's important to me that I try and keep them all at a pretty good level, not just focus on one at the expense of the others.
Absolutely. And I will say that that's one thing this partnership has definitely brought to the table for me is that help and kind of accountability in managing some of these. I mean, I say normal, but to me, somebody who struggles with that kind of thing as well, it's not normal. You know what I mean? It seems abnormal to struggle with these things, and so yeah, you've definitely given me some very actionable steps. You've given me a lot of knowledge about it, which really kind of helps me to be at ease about it and move forward. Not take it as like a moral failing or an issue, that I've struggled in these certain areas and haven't found the tools yet to help. And so I'm curious if you could kind of speak about it's something you've said to me before, and that is life is training. And I've thought about it and talked about how it's important what I feed myself with, and what I listen to, and all of these things. But to think of that in the broader context of my whole life, how I live, and what my motives are in that context. Yeah, I'd love to kind of hear that from your point of view.
Well, life is training is because that's just how I, again, growing up and studying warrior cultures and such, particularly, samurai, life is training. And obviously you have the physical, that one I think is the most obvious. So we'll kind of brush past that as we already touched on it quite a bit. But then you have the mental and emotional, right, which I think are pretty tightly together there.
Yeah.
And that's, difficult situations are great for that. We've talked about silver linings in other discussions before, and that's one of the best ways I know to build character. Tough times, it's a great way to build character, to build the ability to focus the mind when normally it's hard to. At the same time, just regular day-to-day things can do that. When you're walking down the street, how long can you actually keep yourself consciously focused and eyes on a single point while walking towards it? Is actually a lot harder than it seems. That's mental, and then you have the emotional that's so closely tied to it, because being able to grab your own mind and focus its attention is the beginnings, in my opinion, of being able to control, as much as you can, of course, your emotional reactions to things. The emotions are going to be there, but you can control your expression of the emotion. And so that is emotional training as far as I'm concerned. And then, of course, you have your spiritual, which is, that's very individual, I feel. I don't even know how I would begin to talk about that in application, but that's just, strengthening your beliefs through inquiry, through discussion with people, more experienced, wiser, maybe even just different than yourself, to, expand your own spiritual body, your own knowledge of it, your own ability to ponder the various ways it can be seen. And then we have just the life habits. And of course, the best way, in my opinion, to approach that as far as training goes is just finding ways to cope with your inclinations towards it. As I said before, that's my weakest area, really. So for me, it's about, knowing how to set alarms and paying attention to the alarms, and, knowing when to put those alarms, to remind me to eat, to remind me to, brush my teeth, things of this nature.
Okay, absolutely. And also, one thing that I is new for me as well. I've done note taking before and journaling, to varied effect. But one thing I was never very good at, and it's something that you brought to my attention, is taking that time to just review and go back over and analyze my progress and see where I'm at and what needs to change. And so maybe let's talk just a little bit about that, and like taking time to just kind of recover and reflect.
Absolutely. Well, recovery, what you mentioned there at the end, so let's talk about that first, is equally as important as the training, right? You cannot train again if you haven't recovered from your previous training. And the more you have recovered from it, the more you can push yourself each training session, regardless of which form of training you're talking about here. And then I would say a much subtler benefit of appropriate and correct recovery is decision making, self control. The better rested you are, sleep and just general energy levels, the more stable your moods are going to be, the clearer your thoughts are going to be, the better decisions you can make. And, a lot of us are not getting enough sleep these days, or vice versa, getting too much sleep and now you feel sluggish all day. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that can happen just as much. So it's finding the appropriate amount of recovery, not too much, not too little, just enough to recover and get back to it, because you can lose momentum too.
And so
We're always building habits, whether good or bad.
mm,
And sedentary versus active is a basic habit that other habits fit with it.
mm, wow.
So you don't want to build too much of a sedentary habit or sedentary
Okay.
habits.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so besides that, and I know you mentioned sleep, is there anything else that needs to go into our recovery?
And the reflection that times of recovery generally allow us to have are also very important, because it's only through actually reflecting on what's been done, the effects that those things have had, and how we manage them, how we can manage them better, or, any of these things, that we can actually take account, improve, adjust, all these things. And the best times to do that are recovery, in my opinion. And so they go together, reflection and recovery.
So kind of going back to training, I know we talked a little bit about just the nature centric focus of this, but as far as equipment goes, you mentioned a few things. Now, is there anything that I need to be able to begin training, or that anybody viewing this would need to be able to begin training under these regimens?
Honestly, no. You don't need anything, right? Except for maybe the space to do it in. So you need the space to be able to move, of course, just enough to do what you need to do. You shouldn't be flinging your limbs about sporadically, especially not in the beginning, we're not talking martial arts here. We're talking basic training. However, there are certainly things that can help, and I have plenty of experience with a number of them. So like I said, I started out with calisthenics myself, but I also can recommend, and all of these can be utilized from home, and most of them are not very expensive. You have gymnastics rings, you have resistance bands, you have general cardio that doesn't take any equipment except for maybe a pair of running shoes. You have your bag work by a punching bag or something. Last I knew, they were usually between $100 to $200. So you get one of them, hang it somewhere, you're good. And then you have your free weights, dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells. Those are the more expensive things, but I mean, they also are generally one-time buys, as long as you get, somewhat decent ones. They're big pieces of metal. They shouldn't be wearing out for your life. So it's a one-time purchase. But all of that equipment, like I said, is not mandatory. It's not essential. It's your choice. Do you want to go that route? For instance, if your goal is to be stronger, like you're concerned about muscle, then you're probably going to want to grab some free weights. Nothing on here is going to push your strength or size as quickly or as efficiently as some free weights will.
Hmm.
The only thing that I don't have experience with, I hope to someday, but I would still recommend to use, if you can, cable machines. But they take a lot of space too, so you gotta have the space, at least unless you're going to a gym, of course.
Hmm.
And that's perfectly fine too. I have worked with machines before, you know, not much, only 6 months to a year's worth in my entire decade plus of training, but that's going to change too, though, because I have to start going. I don't have the weights to test myself with one rep max anymore. I only have 400 pounds worth of weight. But, and so I have used machines. I could help you out, but there may be people out there more qualified in that area. I don't want to pretend to be knowing everything about everything or to be an expert in everything. I'm not the expert and never really plan to be in machines, but I have quite an abundance of experience outside of the machines. So,
Okay. And it sounds like no matter what, it's an investment into, helping you reach your goals, no matter what those goals may be. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. Also, I'd like to just kind of explore a little bit and maybe give people a clearer picture of what is this training looking like down the road. Say, I've worked with you for, a few years. I've reached all my basic goals, and now, I'm looking to kind of move into the next steps. And so, what would that look like?
Well, I would say you have kind of two options. It's either you take it on yourself, and my hope for everybody would be that after a few years, I would like anybody that I work with that long to start being able to handle some of their own health journey, not meeting with me multiple times every week, just touching base when you need somebody with more experience to hear you out, you know, or somebody for support because, maybe you don't have a lot of healthy support in your life. That happens. So that would be the main route I hope everybody could take. The other route that could be taken would be to choose more advanced and specific goals, and we can certainly program directly for those goals. That's going to take more effort and focus and sacrifice on your part as a client, but I do believe we can all reach pretty extreme goals. We all have different limitations once we reach those levels, so let's be realistic about it. But generally, we can figure something out.
This wraps up another Marshall Forest conversation. Wishing you progress on your path and health throughout your day. This is Logan and Steven out.